Narragansett Regional School District School Committee to order, and we will begin with the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag
of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I did want to alert everybody that this meeting is being recorded by NRSD in conjunction with the Templeton Community TV, TCTV station, and is provided to both Templeton and Phillips and Cable Access TV. It also is put out on their Facebook page. They have a YouTube channel, and you can link to them through Templeton's website. So any of our meetings, almost all of our meetings are recorded. So we're here tonight for FY21, fiscal year 21, budget informational hearing. As we had promised last year, we wanted to get out before the public in the communities and discuss the budget earlier rather than later, and kind of give everyone an idea of what we're working on and what we're working with. So we scheduled tonight to do just that. The school committee has met for the better part of probably 2 months now. We pretty much ended the FY20 budget and went right into FY21 planning. And we, just to be clear, the school committee has made no decisions, taken no votes. So this is purely informational. We've asked Dr. Kazavant to put together a synopsis of our discussion of what we've looked at, where we are, and then we'll go through that. The school committee will be able to ask questions, and then we'll open it up to the public. Once we do that, we'll ask you to come to the front. Just identify who you are and what town you're from, and then you can either ask a question, offer an opinion. We will ask you to try and keep it to less than 3 minutes so that everybody here will have an opportunity to speak. And I'll reiterate those rules when we get to the point where we're ready for public input. So with that, I will turn it over to Dr. Kazavant.
Madam Chair. This budget season really kind of picked up where FY20 left off by a couple months or so. So we're going to go through some of the numbers that we use every year in order to formulate an idea of where we're going to stand for the budget. Certainly not an exhaustive list, and meaning that we did not make a slide for every single data point that we usually do for the final budget presentation. So, but certainly there's enough here to get a pretty good idea of what we're talking about, and if there's any other questions, we can certainly try to answer those as we go through it. So, as always, we start off with the October enrollment number. This is an important number. It often gets confused with the foundation enrollment that Chapter 70 is used to calculate. So, to put it simply, on October 1, through the SINS process, we send to the state the number of residents that are currently in the district as of October 1, to include students who may obviously live in the district and attend a special needs school anywhere in the state. Okay, so again, these are just residents from both Templeton and Phillips. As you can see, again, we just took a quick snapshot of the last 4 fiscal years, and we've seen a steady increase in terms of how many residents are attending our schools. Templeton has seen some of the larger increases, somewhere in the order of 44 from FY20 to FY21, as an example. And the total enrollment has increased with one dip year in FY20. But for the most part, our enrollment has been increasing at a fairly steady rate, which in the end helps with funding moving down, for the foundation enrollment, which we're not going to really talk about much here today. So the cherry sheet, the estimates came out a couple weeks ago, and It breaks down into our local revenues and, of course, our payouts. But Chapter 78 for FY21, and we, again, anytime we can take a shot at the state, but once again, the Great City Mass has failed the district in places that need the district in the taxpayer hands. We do not receive the amount of aid that we should receive because we are held harmless. To say that the state pays us more money than we actually have students. Again, conversation for a later time that really enters into the foundation, but in general, we do not receive the type of aid that a lot of districts whom fit our profile who are not held harmless. And that's what we talk about when we say that the state is giving us more money than we have kids to generate that, or residents. You're held harmless, and that means they'll never pay you any less. So we saw the smallest increase that you probably could realize for $39,000. Our school choice receiving, it decreased by a couple $1,000s. We stayed pretty static in terms of our school choice receiving. October 1, I believe, is somewhere around 245 now, but probably was at 243 when the SIMS information went up. Year over year, that's been pretty steady. Charter school tuition reimbursement, that increased by $7,000. The state's way of trying to help mitigate some costs in terms of charter school. Regional transportation, which is nice, it should be more, but increased by $12,000. School choice sending, decrease of $84,000. Next time I present, I have a graph that shows school choice in and school choice out roughly. But this is probably one of the lowest that our school choice out has been in a very long time, which is a good indicator that obviously students are staying in the district. So when you see a decrease of $84,000, it doesn't always break down to $5,000 per kid given the sped increments, but that's a pretty sizable decrease. I think it was somewhere around 125 school choice out kids. Charter school sending, it decreased. That's a good sign as well. That means less kids are, of course, going to charter schools. Our E&D usage, excess and deficiency, we applied $500,000 to obviously to close the gap. It's our thought that we could apply the same amount, of course, with approval. Medicaid, we used quite a bit of money last year in order to, of course, offset the difference. That, we were worried about that. We put $300,000 last year towards the deficit, and we came up $100,000 short in actual Medicaid receipts. So that is something that we'll have to keep an eye on. And again, for lack of a better word, fairly desperate on our part to try to keep as many staff as possible in order to offset, obviously, the budget from last year. So, as usual, like many districts like us and around us, we have seen a minimal increase in revenue and a sizable increase in expense. So, with that said, taking everything into consideration, we created our FY21 budget as we always do. We look at what we need. And then we, of course, plug in the numbers such as salaries, contract, obligations, contractual obligations, et cetera, et cetera. And it should come to no surprise that the two positions that, for example, we were needing last year but did not hire, one an intensive special needs teacher at the elementary level and a school psychologist, if this sounds familiar, and it should, because we banged that drum pretty hard last year. We in fact need them still. The need has certainly not diminished. In one case, in terms of the intensive special needs teacher at the elementary level, we really don't have an option. In terms of our obligation to meet the needs of the children through the IEP process, we're going to have to hire that position no matter what. So, as we always do, we take all those things into consideration, and again, we came up with this number. $20,660,000, I'm rounding. Templeton increase on that alone would be $1 million. The Phillipston increase would be $183,000. You see the percentages. It was Yogi Berra who said that it's deja vu all over again. These are numbers that are very, very similar to those that we discussed initially last year. That doesn't come as much as a surprise because nothing much has changed. We again, minimal amount of monies through aid through the state. If your bills are roughly the same, etc. So this was concerning for all the obvious reasons, because again, just 4 or 3 it seems like just yesterday, we were sitting, in the auditorium in November for the 3rd time, and of course the percent increases were far less. So we decided to just do something different. Took this and we said, okay, we took out everything that we need, and we just went with just the staff that we have currently at this point in time. What would that look like? And not much changed. Certainly, it went down, but we're still looking at an increase for Templeton of $756,000, increase of $137,000. And so we started to think about what we went through last year, to be quite honest, and what we need to do different in order to create a budget that meets the needs of all our students. So the obvious questions always come up when we start talking about this, and again, this really comes from the meetings last year, etc. Like, why aren't cuts at the middle school and high school, level enough? Well, you're talking about $500,000 in cuts. That's what it would take. There's not $500,000 in cuts in this district, folks. I'm here to tell you. We needed to align the budget, obviously, with the same increases at the town department. So we used a 2.5% as the number, because we needed a number to increase from the town's monies, just to figure out where we would be. And even if we were to cut an administrator and 2 teachers at the middle school, high school level, of course, at the higher levels, it would still leave us a $225,000 offset from that original number. So we knew immediately that there was really it wasn't feasible to go any further down this road. So again, the definition of insanity, right? Last year when thinking about this, we had 7, 8, I really don't remember, quite frankly, how many scenarios we had. I know that there were a lot, maybe more than 10. The same number was massaged many, many different ways. So what we've decided to do is really to break down just 2 options: current configuration and district reconfiguration. This is not new. Again, 2 years ago we talked about this. Last year we certainly talked about it a lot. The current configuration as we know it is exactly as we know it. Phillipston, Templeton Elementary, middle school, high school. When we start talking about the proposed district reconfiguration, which we have done in the past, and obviously in order to reduce costs, we would have to reassign the grades as follows. Templeton Elementary would have to assume all pre-K through 4th grade. 5th grade would have to be moved back to the middle school. Obviously, as you can see, then this complex would accommodate all 5th through 12th graders for this district. And what configuration, again, we haven't gone much farther, but this, again, is something that when we started to look at the numbers, etc., we noticed that we did not only staffing, we're talking about obviously money, we started to see that we could reduce quite a bit of cost. So what does that mean? Well, obviously going again, talking about what the current versus proposed. Right now, currently, at Phillipston, we have K through 5, as of October 1, I believe it was, we use 113 students. It's a principal, nurse, custodian, guidance. There's 0 guidance, 0.25 psychologists at best. and 7 teachers. Templeton Elementary has a principal, assistant principal, nurse, 5 custodians, and then you can certainly see that. When we looked at the proposed, or at least the other configuration, you would see that, again, elementary-wise, at Templeton pre-K through 4, a principal, psychologist, assistant principal, guidance counselor, and the nurses. Middle school, high school, again, would be 5 through 12. What we figured out, let me just, again, take a step back to tell you how we got these numbers. All I simply did was took the numbers in classrooms as of December 1st, basically graduated them. So if they were in the 2nd grade, I magically made them 3rd graders. And then, of course, then graduated our actual seniors, moved them up, and then just took the same exact number of pre-K and kindergartners that we have this year right now. Because we never know how many pre-K or kindergarten until we actually have them. So in doing that, and it, by the way, my recommendation to the committee regardless, is that we are not going to be able to take a school choice student between K and grade 8, period. We're too full. There's a risk to that, and we'll get into that in terms of when we start talking monies. But in either one of these, any of the configurations, we are not going to be able to take any school choice kids, period, given the numbers that we have. So to alleviate any potential fear or maybe concerns about, oh my God, there's going to be 800 kids in one building, that's not the case. We'd have to move the 5th grade back up to the middle school, high school complex. Okay? So, benefits. Well, equity. Do we meet the IEPs? Do we meet student needs across the board in terms of the elementary specifically? I'm certainly going to say yes to that, but it's certainly not equitable. Anytime that you have to share staff, it's hard. Someone is certainly not going to be in one place more than the other, no matter how you try, and that becomes an equity issue. And especially around, really, from the perspective of guidance and school psychologists, etc. We need to, if it provides much needed additional staff. The 2nd nurse at Templeton Elementary, we were told by EPH when we thought about, again, November happened, we thought about sharing a nurse. DPH was clear to say that they would not support that, which is not code. That we do not share nurses. It's not safe, and given a whole host of reasons that you have to keep a nurse where there is a school, regardless. And so that obviously creates an issue at this point at TES, because we have one full-time nurse and we have a person, a sub, who comes in a couple hours a day. Custodians obviously would be moved, up to TES. It's a large building and it requires, more people than we obviously have. We talk about counselors and therapists in one location. That is key. We have a lot of need, social emotionally, especially at the elementary level. We need to combine our services. We need to utilize our staff more efficiently, and it's hard to do that when you're on the move. The ability to assign support staff to provide more intervention, ECBAs, paras, etc. And obviously, I put this bullet here, addition of the intense special needs teacher, like it's a benefit. There is no option. I keep saying that over, and no matter what happens, we will have an intensive needs teacher at the elementary level, period. So what are the drivers? Well, we talk about there's the regular drivers. There's salary increases, there's insurance increases, there's cost of living, there's utilities, all of those things. But one of the things that is I think is a touchy subject, and it's hard to really talk about. It's hard to talk about, openly, because the fear is that you're blaming, a certain section or group of kids, etc., for your financial woes. This is absolutely not the case. Let me be clear. One, this is the state's fault. They do not reimburse us enough for the special needs services that we provide, period. They have not, they're trying to work that out through the formula, but they still haven't figured it out, and it costs a lot of money. Two, the special needs schools, right, and there are many, 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 they raise their rates, and this is my opinion, unchecked. We simply receive a letter in the mail that says, so-and-so special needs, facility has increased its tuition by X. And that has been a point of contention with many of us, so we don't have a lot of control over that. Transportation goes up all the time. So it's certainly not the student who needs any type of, special education accommodation modification. It's really the system around it that charges for those services. But this is a breakdown of since FY15 in terms of our tuitions, transportation, IEPs, and the number of parents. I want to point out something in FY18. You see a gigantic drop in IEPs, and that's because much of our speech, OT, PP folks moved those services over to 504s where they belong in most cases. But as you can see in FY19, we jump right back up there, and we're moving, in a direction of higher, more need. Paras, they are essential to our work, period. As you can see, by the way, I want to point this out. In FY20, you see the jump from 43 to 47. That wasn't budget. We didn't do that from a budgetary standpoint. That was based on need. IEP meeting happened. Someone's need, the decision of the team was to have a 1-to-1 aid, etc. There is no saying to the team or to anyone else, I'm sorry, we can't afford that. It just must happen. And so these are the type of costs that we are, that we see not only in real time, but we're seeing, year to year. And so, it goes without saying that these services are mandated. There's not a question of whether or not we're going to provide these types of services. It's just a matter of yes. So, in essence, to recap, we felt that the towns have spoken, certainly. And both agree that they will not support large increases, to the school budget. District reconfiguration will allow us to continue to move ahead academically. And not only that, become as financially stable as we possibly can as a district. Is it academic? Yeah, it's academically sound and allows for much needed addition of key social emotional staff. We need to consolidate, and you can't do that if, again, we're moving between buildings. It's costing us more money in some cases, because we cannot share services simple 5 or 6 miles down the road. And again, there are a lot of drivers to this, but we need to provide these type of services at the youngest possible level in order to stem or to at least slow the need for out-of-district placement. We need to create programs to keep students in our district, not just to save money, because if it's deemed by the team to move forward and to educate a student outside of our district, then it will happen. But if you have nothing to offer whatsoever, then they're almost forced to go outside. We want students, they're part of our community. We want them to be in our buildings. And so the sooner we can, work with students in terms of younger students, the better off we'll be in that regard. So, that is just a quick, not so quick, overview of the process and our decision at this point in time. As you can see, it is kind of open-ended. It's really current configuration versus a change in configuration. And from that point,
First, based on what you've seen tonight in our previous discussions, do you have any questions or comments or more information to share before we open up for public comment.
We do have one question. When we talk about the state saying that we're in the hold harmless, and that it pays us more than we have kids, do we know how many more kids that we need to get to before we get to the number where they're going to actually pay us more money?
So at the very beginning of last year, and I'm talking about FY20, they were talking about this opportunity act. And as everyone saw, people going back and forth, were marshaling back and forth in terms of this money, those monies, this money, those monies. So before they actually applied any money whatsoever, we were 101 kids below, okay, what they were paying, okay, in terms of when you multiply simply the foundation amount times the number of kids it shows, and at that point it was 1,296. That was foundation rate, which, by the way, folks, that is kids who are educated in a public setting from Templeton and Phillipston that may or may not even go here. It could be school choice kids out, it could be charter school out, it could be those type of things, and it's 2 years in the rears. Okay? So FY20, you're dealing with FY18 numbers. Okay? FY21, FY19. Okay. So it becomes a bit of a thing. So next thing you know, they suggested a little bit more money. Next thing you know, it dropped from 101 because again, they changed the foundation. They changed how much money they were going to give us. Next thing you know, it dropped from 101 to, I think it was 80. Okay. Then they have settled on the amount that we're going to, hopefully over a period of time, but as of right now, Margaret, I'm looking to you, I want to say it was 50.
Actually, I just
you
got the
do quick math?
update
Okay.
I did, so we're about 42 resident students short of breaking out of hold harmless. So remember, simple math, per pupil times number of pupils equals the amount of aid. And they'll never give you less than what you had the last year. And what we got the last year and the year before that and the year before that was more than what we calculate out at. So we are in debt to the state, which we call hold harmless. So that's what they say. So that's why. And we're 40. If we had 42 more residents, we would be equal to the amount of aid that we had.
Which would make us eligible for more Chapter 70 aid as well. Well,
And that's rough.
Just
It might be 43. I just did a rough calculation.
So does that change year to year depending on how many students we have attending public schools that are residents?
Well, the big change, and not to go too much into it, but as everyone knows, the Student Opportunity Act was implemented past this prior year. Unfortunately, it will be implemented over 7 years. So there's a target for year 7 to be funded to what the Foundation Review Board Committee's decisions were and what they came up with should be fair. So over 7 years, we'll see that. Because there was nothing built into the legislation that said, you will do it in 1/7 increments. You will do it in, they didn't say that. So a lot of it's being driven by the monies that are available, and of course the governor's numbers came out, and where the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education has prioritized where the money should go. So when you look at the rates that are used to calculate, they put a lot of money this year into guidance and psychological services. Health benefits, they're trying to normalize because those increases have been off the map compared to a minor inflationary adjustment that has always been given. And then the third area is low income, but they did a low income adjustment last year. So this year's low income adjustment is much smaller than a lot of districts feel it should be. What ultimately happened, because we're still in hold harmless, is all we qualified for was the $30 per pupil aid, which is where that $39,200 come up. So what we'll see is as they begin to implement more of the Student Opportunity Act monies, that we will see that the gap between where we are and where we need to be to get at a hold harmless should go down. So hopefully sooner rather than later, but we just don't know because we're really at the behest of the legislature with the monies they pass. Any other questions or comments from the school committee? Okay. At this point then, I'd like to open up the floor for any public comment. Again, what I'd like to ask is if you have something that you'd like to say or a question you'd like to ask, please come to the front. There are 2 microphones. Just identify who you are, what town you're from. State your question or your comments. If you do have a question, they're to be directed to me as the chair, and then I will have, if we are able to answer or not answer, we'll let you know, but I'll direct your question outward from there. So at this point, do we have any comments or questions from the community?
Mary Enstrom, Baldwinville. This thing's on. All right, my question is there any conceivable way of us keeping Phillipston open? That's the first question, possibly taking pre-K and kindergarten and put it in Phillipston so it doesn't get closed? Or is there another way to keep the 5th grade out of the middle school? They're really not mature enough to be with the 6th graders. Is there any other way around that? Thank you.
So we have 2 questions, just in case anyone couldn't hear. The first was, and they're really kind of tied together, is there any conceivable way to keep Phillipston open? And then the second question would be is, what does that mean for the 5th grade? Would there be a way to keep the 5th grade in the elementary school? So I'll throw it over to Dr. Kazavant.
I think, okay, so last year when it was back and forth between 19.7, 19.5, 19.7, 19.5, the 19.7 represented, obviously increase. And if that was our base, then because it's hard to do this kind of money more quarterbacking now, but that reduction of funds was obviously very difficult. So I'm not putting it on the fact that, because we didn't get that, we can't keep, Phillipston open. It would have helped, is what I'm saying. It would have been more money than we have, say, right now, okay? Pre-K, depending on the year, because I'm going to say it's self, because we have the tuition in, et cetera, and through revolving account, et cetera, there's a grant that they keep saying they're going to take, but they don't. It's only $30,000 anyway, but at least it's something. Okay. Some years are better than others, right? Because depending on how many special needs students come in to pre-K, which, by the way, towns are responsible for, whether they're here or otherwise, you never know. So I'm saying that depending on how many kids who tuition in, special needs kids, the grant, all these other stuff. K, of course, is the general fund, right? We pay for all of our kindergarten teachers. So when we were looking at this, I don't know, in one of the scenarios last year, it would have cost somewhere in the area, I think, and again, you'll have to, I'm going to definitely think of a wild guess now at this point, but it was somewhere in the area of like $285,000 grant total, but that depended on pre-K. And if we could expand pre-K, and if we could expand kindergarten through school choice and all these things. So it's hard for me to answer that right off the bat, because I would need a model, right? I would need to know, what monies I'm actually utilizing. I think the other part about 5th grade, the other question about the 5th grade is that there's quite a bit of research on the 5th grade, whether they belong either at the elementary or at the middle school. And the number one reason that they move 5th grade back and forth is money. And so literally 5th grade has its kind of its own data set. It has its own, information out there. And I think the good news is that this district has, you'd have to tell me how long 5th grade has been up here. I don't know. I know it's been a very long time. 19. I'm sorry? 19 years, which is a long time. And so this district is able and, is able to handle that. I think if this was a brand new idea, it'd be really, really difficult. given that we have a 19-year experience to do that. You know, I saw it work very, very well. No one would disagree, though, that the 5th grade, you know, being at the elementary level was great, you know. But again, it's a matter of what are you going to do if you have to find X amount of dollars? Decisions obviously have to be made.
And I think too, if memory serves, the 5th grade kind of kept to their own hallway. So we do, when they've been up here in the middle school, I believe that we try to keep them to themselves. I haven't been in 5th grade for a long time. But I do know that there is an active effort to try and keep them together. I did want to make one comment because we seem to forget some history. Last year we started out at 20.3 million, I believe is the number. And had 20.3 million passed, we may or may not be having the same discussion. Our base would have been much bigger. It was put in place to support the current configuration. And at that base, growing would have been less taxing to the towns, okay, because you start off larger, so you get a larger percent increase no matter what. When we cut, that was the first indication that the current configuration really might not be able to be maintained. And that, I think people need to just kind of reconcile from where we started and how we got here. As Dr. Casavan said, you know, call it 1907 or 1905, with those cuts in play, we have negotiated contractual increases. Our staff needs to be compensated for the wonderful work they do. So there's health insurance, obviously, as well as retirement benefits that we have to pay. So there's not a lot of places where, you know, so we won't buy the kids pencils anymore. That doesn't save us a lot of money. We just don't have a lot of places to cut. I think, as you've heard Dr. Casavan say, we are very staff intensive. So anything we do always typically comes down to a staff number. So thank you. I hope we answered as well as we could. And I do want to remind everybody, we've just really started getting into the nuts and bolts of some of these discussions. So if we don't have answers for you tonight, we'll make sure that we take the questions down and figure out, you know, how to respond the next time we get together. So, any other questions?
I'll go next.
Hello? No? Oh. Okay, so I just want to say that.
Name and tell.
Oh, God.
I know.
Bridget Gauthier, Phillipston, Massachusetts. I find it ironic that you quoted Albert Einstein on insanity, because I find that a lot of us feel the same way, because year after year we keep coming to the same situation of, let's close Phillipston and it will solve everything. Okay, that being said, I have a couple questions. 27 teachers in Templeton, 7 in Phillipston. But then when seeing the perspective year, it said 27 teachers. So again, we're going to let go of more teachers because it said 27 teachers. We have more than 27 teachers in this district in the elementary. So 7 more teachers. See ya until we decide, oh, no, never mind, we want you back again.
Well, that
Question number 1.
5th grade moving up. So 5th grade's coming out of those numbers, I believe.
Let's hear, and then we'll.
Then you can, yeah. And then 1 principal in TC or TCS, whatever. Yeah. And 1 assistant principal. We have 2 principals in the district and 1 assistant principal in the district at the elementary level. How do you choose? And as far as the 5th grade staying where they are and how it's been there for 19 years where they were in the middle school, kids nowadays are different than 19 years ago. Everything's a lot different. So that's just my piece.
I just want to address the how do you choose question. That is not for us to discuss. That's a personnel issue. Dr. Casavan handles that, and that is done under his realm. So that is not
So we don't
open.
have it. So nobody has a say.
hiring personnel and any personnel issues is under the superintendent's purview. It's not a school committee thing, so we can't respond to that question at all. So, as far as the number of teachers, I think, Vicki, you were,
Correct me if I'm wrong, but when you see the 27 in the elementary school plus the 7 in Phillipston, you see 27 in the pre-K to 4, fifth grade teachers are pulled out of that and moved up to the fifth grade, correct? So that's not all, but I don't, there are cuts. There are cuts. I just don't know the number off the top of my head.
So again, we're cutting the teachers we just hired on.
but remember last year, when we decided to hire those extra classroom teachers at Templeton Elementary School, it was done on an interim one-year basis. We never guaranteed keeping those teachers longer than 1 year, because we didn't know financially if that could be supported. Unfortunately, it looks as though with where we're going and the numbers we've been dealt, that it probably is not feasible to keep all of the staff and maintain fiscal solvency to keep the district running.
And so, if I may, sorry.
Yes, no, please.
One of my, and again, just depending on what is required of us, but one of the main concern I have is going to be class size. I have said that in the 2 open meetings that we've had, because again, we get into the business of taking, 5 classrooms, right, or 5, for example, second grade, taking those, I'm just going to take, basically look at this and say, well, as of October 1, I use second grade, right, as the example, there are 115 district-wide second graders that are split between 5 teachers, 4 at Templeton Elementary and 1 at Phillipston. In order to again, to meet numbers, et cetera, we're going to have to take those students enrollment into 4. We did that with the kindergarten. Yeah, we're talking about, again, if no one moves in, no one moves out, those are the numbers I use. You're looking at class, again, 28, 29, 27. Again, next time we speak, you will see that. That is a concern because, quite frankly, what do you do when 5 kids? We just had a family of 5 move in on Monday, and we did. And so, what happens if these numbers get higher? Well, we're going to have to think about what does that mean almost before it even happens. The state has rules around how many kids you can have in a room. When you start getting close to that, you have to do something. Will it happen across the board? I don't know. I don't know how many kids. Well, 40 some odd kids moved in, again, year over year, October 1, almost half of them, more than half of them were at the elementary level. So will that happen again? Will it happen at the middle school? I will never know until it happens.
Yeah.
But that is my number 1 concern.
So, seeing that this is a financial information hearing and not knowing what people in both communities know about how we go about hiring, firing, moving people around, and that type of thing, and being as transparent as we can be for the communities, can we explain the bumping process so that they understand that we can't just take the highest paid teacher and cut that person, or take
The state.
and it makes it very difficult to talk about getting rid of a position because we're such a small community and in a small school. There are names attached to certain positions, and so even with bumping positions, you can sometimes figure it out. So if you just kind of give that information so people have that idea.
A very long time ago, it just really boiled down to how long seniority.
Seniority, right.
Seniority ruled the day. That's not the case. It certainly plays into it a lot, but certification was the day. So if you've been a teacher for 30 years, certification rules today. At the elementary level, however, most teachers are elementary, they have that certification, right, for development. So, unless they have one, some of the older certifications, but that's how it'll be mostly seniority, I would imagine. We have not taken a look at that, quite frankly, but there'll be cuts across the board again in order to hit again. Let's take a step back. I've presented two scenarios. I've presented the current configuration scenario. At the very minimum, is going to cost going around $20 million. If that is not going to, if we had trouble getting 19.7, 20 million and some change, from my perspective, not feasible. I need to think a different way. My staff need to think a different way. And so that's what we've done. Just remember, 3 meetings. 19.7 did not pass. 3 meetings. District-wide. I know that today, someone came to me and said, well, geez, I feel like you're picking on my town. I'm not picking on any town. That was a joint meeting. Templeton and Phillipston were in one room. 3 times, we voted no. My job is to make sure then, quite frankly, that we position ourselves so that I'm not putting forth a budget that it's not going to literally see the light of day. And so I saw what I was part of. We all were. And that was in November. So I'm just going to go ahead and again, and there are a lot of people here who were there every meeting. They stood every time, absolutely, every time. Democracy rules the day. More people who did not want that number stood or attended, or however you want to put it. You know what? I didn't like it, but that's democracy. That's what open meeting was. That's what happened. So we move this is why I'm presenting these 2 scenarios, but yet showing you that we've really kind of left that current configuration really behind, because we don't have the time to move around that number very
Anyone else like to come down?
Hi, Jim Buzzell, Phillipston. Chairperson, chairwoman? Okay. So the 2004 regional agreement, which is kind of like what we're stating, trying to use that as the base now, puts town contributions at the percentage of the student population into the district, right? Okay. So currently the populations on the handouts for tonight has Phillipston at 14.92 projected for 21, and Templeton at 85.08, 100%. So my first question is, what percentage of the population is school choice?
Okay, so I think to speak to, this sheet is what you're looking at?
Yep.
This sheet does not represent a straight percentage allocation of need after revenues are reduced from Chapter 7, you take that away. The statutory assessment methodology says that both towns will pay their minimum local contribution. Then whatever is left over that needs to get funded will then be split by the percentage of the student population. So what you see here is not an 84 to 16 or whatever the point whatever, right. Because Phillipston's minimum local contribution percentage is higher than Templeton's when you come down to an overall percentage base.
So my question was...
That's a state-driven formula, by the way.
But my question was, what's the population percentage of school choice?
Yeah, so as far as school choice, yep.
So if you're looking at
the elementary level, or I guess district-wide, sure, doesn't matter.
So the district, as of October 1, make sure I have the right paper here, we had 1,482 enrolled students. 71% of them were from Templeton, 12% were from Phillipston, and 17 Phillipston, yep. And district, well,
The remainder.
Remainder is.
Sure.
But I had that at one point, so, only- right. So that's how it broke down, 17% is the district choice.
Okay.
At the elementary level,
I got to imagine it's
well,
representative of that number. Close enough. So I guess my second part of that question, which is probably what you were speaking on, was if we combine into Templeton Center and all of the students are in one spot, would the town contributions then reflect the student populations, or will we continue with whatever the formula that you were speaking of is going to be? And I guess maybe tertiary, why is that formula in place as opposed to what's spelled out in the regional agreement? Why are we moving beyond the regional agreement, and where is that certification?
So let me just explain a little bit about regional agreements. The state has.
Thank you.
You're welcome. So it's going to be a moment here, but try and follow along. So the state has a mandated formula called the statutory assessment methodology, which I just explained. What the state has also said is when you craft your regional agreement, you can also come up with an alternative assessment methodology. The state likes to keep things simple, so it prefers simpler. Okay, it might be a strict, all expenses will be allocated by student population, some derivative thereof. So we use, and specifically for last year, we actually had to use. So when you go into a 1/12 situation, you have to use the statutory. So even if you have an alternate assessment methodology in your agreement, if you go into a 1/12, which means on July 1st of the current fiscal year you didn't have a budget, you have to use statutory methodology. So that is a little thing in the law that you have to abide by. So as far as where school choice fits into that, school choice student population does not factor into the assessments at all. As far as what you look at, I'm going to hold this up with this sheet is. School choice receiving is a separate revolving fund. So any monies that we receive to compensate us from other districts go into a revolving fund. Any monies that we have to send out to other districts, though, must be in our general fund. So the monies we send out are on here. The monies we take in are in a revolving account. The revolving account we utilize to pay for expenses. So our budget, what you see here of a total of, 20, whatever the amount is, 20 million. Okay. Put my glasses on, sorry. Our budget is actually much higher than that. And I think we've presented at different meetings, you'll see this plus all of the revolving accounts and grants. So we do utilize the school choice monies, but they're not included in percentage-based allocations for town assessments. So did that answer at least I think maybe the first part of your question?
It answered a big part of it for sure. I guess where does the statutory methodology, where did that originate from, I guess was that the tertiary question?
It's, okay, and that's a state mandated thing. So
okay,
if you have,
it
is. If you have nothing in your agreement that talks about how you're going to allocate, you actually have to say we're going to use statutory method. That's the minimum requirement.
But
unless
we
both.
do have a thing in our thing saying how we're going to do it.
We do. So we had at one point been using the alternate assessment methodology, and this goes way back before my time. I'm looking around, and I know there's some people here who remember. What had happened was the numbers swung so far that when you looked at statutory versus strict percentages, it was very uneven to the two towns. So every year that you want to use an alternate assessment methodology as outlined in your regional agreement, it must be passed on town floor. So there's a couple of ways to do it. You have two different warrant articles. Do we want to use it, yes or no? And then you pass the budget number without getting into mechanics. And what was happening is that was not getting passed. So we reverted back to the statutory methodology, which both towns seemed to be in agreement of that they would fund. And it kind of leveled out, in some ways, some of the swings.
Okay, thank you.
Yep.
Just
Yep,
to make
no.
it, I don't want to say it's not easier, okay, but just to say that when you look at these percentages on our income sheet, those percentages apply to the additional appropriation that each town gives in the transportation. So I want to make sure that we just, again, because that was a bit of confusion last time. So it's not across the board. That was assumed was across the board. It's not. I just want to make sure I say that.
And if anybody wants to really have a much deeper understanding, please don't call me. Although I can answer you, but please call Dr. Kazamek, because I know he loves to spend hours.
So just to clarify that from my point then, so would a more accurate way, Dr. Cassidy, of looking at that would be to not look at the totals, but look at the minimum contributions as to look at that, would be a more accurate way to look at the percentages being paid. Because the transportation costs, what you're saying, the additional appropriations are quote-unquote other funds that...
The minimum is mandated, so
Yeah.
we just want to make sure that we're clear about that. So the minimum is handed to you. So there's no choice around that.
Got it.
Anything above, and so I shouldn't say anything above and beyond. I'm talking about the transportation and the additional appropriation. That's what those percentages right now. So if you're asking what the best, actually, quite frankly, there are other methods. We've reached out to Mars and a few others, and so I'm interested to hear what some of the other methods are, you know, if they're more equitable. We've heard a lot of different things, honestly, a lot of very, very different things. So I don't want to say what would be easier otherwise. I'd really have to kind of go through the process.
I guess not easier, but a more accurate way to look at it.
Right, so what the state tries to do, without getting into too much detail, is it tries to level the playing field of your member towns. Since we only have two, it's, you know, it may not be as evident, but you take some communities in other areas that have some super wealthy towns and some really not wealthy towns, and they try to level that playing field. So they may require the minimum from the wealthier town to be higher, and it's based upon property values. It's an equalized value, valuation of your properties, and an income number. And the state uses some formulas, and it comes up with the amount of effort it thinks that your town should be able to contribute at minimum to the education of the students. So that's where those two numbers come up with. And that's the state trying to get some equity for the valuations on the town. So. Oh, no, actually, it's recording you, so please speak
Okay.
into it if you don't mind.
Garrett Fandryer Phillipson. I hope you haven't forgotten what kind of an uproar you created when you thought about closing PMS last year. And you can rest assured that that will probably happen again. And if you think about closing PMS, you can rest assured that you will not get any more overrides passed from Phillipson, as we have generously done for many years now. So please think about that before you think about closing PMS.
Hi, I'm Julie Kibbe from Templeton. First of all, I want to say thank you again, as I usually start off my little spiels with. You guys are doing a phenomenal job. I have a third grader this year, and I have a kid up on deck for kindergarten for next year. So thank you. I just have a couple of questions, kind of piggybacking on some of the other questions. School choice is something that is kind of interesting to me. If 17% of that population is coming from school choice, have we done an evaluation to understand what the total cost of that education is for those 17% and how that figures into this equation? I don't want to say we should dump school choice, but if it's a choice between dumping school choice and keeping a school open, that might be something to talk about. And then the other point I just wanted to say I am very concerned about is the class size that Dr. Kazavant mentioned. Even with closing of Phillipston, consolidating the classes and the classroom size growing to 28 to 29 kids per room is insane. And I'm just wondering if we have any data from the state of Massachusetts or New England states on what the average class size is for those successful schools, because I think we want to continue to be a successful school system. And one more point, hold on, I have some notes here. And I just want to say, I know it's not going to be a popular opinion. There are some parents here that I talk to when I'm not in school committee meetings. If it takes closing Phillipston, we need to shrink the budget. I'm going to support the school committee if it means closing the school or if it means keeping it open. Because what we need to do is do what's best for all of the kids, not a small portion of them. So although it makes me unpopular, that's where I stand.
So let me take the second question, and I'm going to say, my guess is that Dr. Kazavant will need to do maybe a little research on average class sizes throughout the state, and maybe we can come back to you at a later time.
Thank you.
Or even, I'm sure Dr. Kazavant knows how to get in touch with you and provide the information. But I think that's when we meet maybe next week, that would probably be very good data for the school community.
James
22, okay.
It's from
So-
the .org, so I know it's part of.
Okay, so that's statewide though, but we're looking at, and it may be different if we want to, if we have some, yeah. So if we want to look at our cohort schools, so, okay. But we'll take a further look into that though, because I'd rather come back with good data as well as cohort data, which is really what we want to look at. We don't want to compare ourselves to some other districts that don't represent who we are. We need to look at those that are successful like we are, so.
And I think we just need to separate out charter schools and the other kind of private schools, obviously. I think that's what you're saying.
Yeah.
But I just want to make sure that
Yeah.
that number is representative of
Right.
what we're looking at, what we're working with financially.
Yeah, so we'll take that as a takeaway, and as I said, I think it'd be great data for the school committee to have anyway for next week. So we'll add that to what pieces of information we'll get, and then we can report out on that. Your first part of the question was school choice. I just want to offer some comments, and then I'll let Dr. Kazman take over, is one of the things people have to understand about school choice and costs is you've got step costs associated with students. Your fixed costs plus your variable costs make up a cost. If we have a classroom with 19 students and we add one, we're not adding a new teacher, we're not adding more lights, all of those fixed costs, which are the bulk of the expense, really don't come into play until you hit the next step where you have to add the teacher. So one of the things that we try to keep a close eye on is where does that step happen and what's going to force us into needing the additional resources that need to grow our base. So right now, as I mentioned, we are spending a lot of money, almost the entire amount, which Ms. Deister can confirm after I'm done, on expenses for the students. So whatever we're bringing in with those students, we are giving right back. We've got a bunch of teachers we're paying out of there. So those incremental costs that you would think if we had just say 25 of our school choice kids were in one grade, we're paying a teacher out of school choice that would cover them. The problem that you have though is when we look at this, this second option that we have, Dr. Kazan already mentioned that he will be recommending we don't take another school choice student. And that to me is the riskier proposition, because we could be putting ourselves potentially in danger years down the road, as soon as maybe 3, 4, 5, I don't know what the number is yet, I think they're looking at it, where if we don't take another student in and we're not getting the school choice receiving monies, and we're spending all of the money on teachers and costs that aren't going to go away, when we don't get enough school choice receiving to cover those, guess what? It's got to go back into the general fund. And the towns are going to have to pay it because we already know the state at this point doesn't have additional revenues for us. So it's a tricky balancing act. So, and just one other point, the state regulations say once you accept a school choice student in, they're yours. You can't tell them they have to go. We have them until they're a senior, unless they choose to leave themselves. So
just to piggyback on that real quick, what is the current cost of, what is the expected education cost per year per student, per pupil? And what are we getting from school choice? I know that's dictated, I know it's 5,000, like that we get in. But what is the average cost to educate that student on an annual basis? And where is the difference there?
So it depends on the building. So when we start doing, well, for the entire district, honestly, I'd have to calculate that number again. I don't know. I don't know right now what the average across the board is, okay, in terms of our district. I know that we're around, I think the foundation is around 12,000 is what they give us. That, trust me, it's more than that to educate. But that's foundation. That's how we get our Chapter 7. So I'll have to find out what the average is for the district. Although I will say to you, that is very skewed. And so I'm also, if I'm going to figure that out, I'm also going to show you by building, because it won't be the same, and it shouldn't be the same because we start figuring this stuff out. But I'm going to talk about school choice for a minute. we have this conversation a lot about looking at the cherry sheet. Cassvan, you got $1.4 million bearing a hole in your pocket. How come you're coming to us for X, Y, and Z? I've said this before, and I'm going to have to say it, I guess, until the day I die. That makes sense if we have no cost coming from that actually takes to run this district. So if we're getting $1.4 million school choice, we have nothing going against that. Nothing. Then I would say you're absolutely right. That's $1.4 million, and we should be doing something. You could, build, God, you could do whatever you want. We receive $1.4 million in some change, and we spend $1.4 million in change in the following ways. 10 or so staff members, $600,000 in insurance, $650,000 of insurance, okay? There's the assistant principal in there, et cetera. Also, professional development, which people say, well, you can do without professional development, not according to the state. You have to professionally develop your students. Part of your students, so sure, but of course your teachers as well. We teach our students, we professionally develop our staff. The fact is that if we did not have actual costs come out of that, you'd be right. I would literally say to you, you're absolutely right. We have $1.4 million not doing anything, so we should do something, right? One time, that's what it's for. It is not good practice to have a dime be associated to school choice when it comes to teachers or insurance. Because if it were to go upside down tomorrow, I still need the same amount of teachers that I have today. And they're going to have to come over to the local side, right? The budget, okay? Insurance, that's obvious. Everybody has to have insurance, okay? So that would have to come over. Yeah, okay, you could argue PD. No, all right, we don't have to do PD this year, or whatever the case. All right, what is the state going to do? I mean, honest to God, they're going to write me a letter and say, you need to do PD. Okay. But we don't have a large amount of money in PD coming out of school choice. These are positions that are literally working every single day. They're not extras. It is not good practice. I'm going to try to come up with a scenario, quite frankly, we're going to try to start working our way out of this hole. In other words, what do I mean by that? To start taking staff out of school choice revolving, bring them over to the local side. That only benefits everyone, because if it were to go upside down, right, more school choice out than in terms of monies, I still need those teachers. We do not have extras. So I'm all on board. The only problem I have is with this contention that we're sitting on this money. If we were sitting on this money, it would be there. It's not. We're utilizing it to pay for 10 teachers, an assistant principal, insurance, etc. That is important to understand. And so, but school choice, it's dangerous. It's like, boy, it's so much money. We're doing so well. Our differential is $700, well, whatever it ends up being. $730,000 is going to be a differential, meaning school choice in and out. We're going to receive, again, it's always a year in arrears, right? So next year, somehow it's $730,000. Are you kidding me? That's fantastic. We're the envy of many districts who pay out close to $1 million in school choice, out, and they border us. Okay? They have to pay it. We need to stop. We need to get out of that mix desperately, because it's going to hurt. And I know I can get going, because it's a financial wave that no one will be able to stop. And it'll fall on the taxpayers. It'll fall on the towns immediately. And that's what I'm afraid of.
So I think to the first point of your question about, so if they do cost more, which I think we're going to find out is not the case, because again, you've got to look at your variable piece that you're really paying for. And the state's done a pretty good job at calculating what that is. First off, as I said, we own whoever's here. So we have that commitment, and they are ours, and we're very happy with that. But I think what you've heard Dr. Kazavant saying is if we're not able to take any school choice this year, by default, we are shutting off that pipeline. So it becomes even more imperative that we start to wean our usage of school choice and get those positions back into the general fund, because eventually that money's not going to be, enough to cover what we have in there.
When you take out pre-K, which are not school choice, they're tuitioned in, okay? So that is a difference. So right now at Templeton Elementary, there are a grand total of 653 students, okay? Only 9%, or pardon me, 8%, 55 of them are school choice. So when you say, how do you figure, that's a great average. That's a great number when you start looking at this financially. Why? I'll pick a grade. The second grade has 12 school choice students. The entire second grade at Templeton Elementary is 12. If you have more than 20% or more than a classroom size of kids, if something should happen and you have to unfortunately reduce a teacher, you don't want those numbers to be, you want to keep those numbers lower than your average class size, right? You want to keep it around 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, maybe 10%, okay? That's a number that you can move around if something should happen staffing-wise, because you're right, because then it starts costing you money to have school choice students in, within the student population. The middle school, yeah, this is an area where there's a problem. It's well over 23% in some grades. Now I'll say, well, what have you done there? Well, 2 schools fed into the middle school. So remember, Phillipston, who currently sits at, or at least on October 1, has 36 school choice students. That's 32% of its entire school population. There's 113 kids and 36 of them are school choice. Well, 32% is too high of a percentage. Because something should go down, not that it could, because it's 1 teacher per grade. I couldn't move those kids effectively, into other classrooms, right? Because it'd be too many. So there is a ratio that you try to keep. So it's a lot on school choice, but we do monitor it very closely, but I will get you those per building and district averages.
And I'm not trying to give you homework, so I apologize for that. But I think it's interesting information to have when you're making a decision that you have in front of you. The question that I would ask, considering the current stance on accepting new school choice, is where was this thought pathology when we were making that decision last year to allow a new kindergarten class in? And I'm not trying to point any fingers, I'm asking because I'd like to understand better.
So if I take you back in time, we sat here and we voted that if we could pull in enough school choice kids, we would open another kindergarten classroom. But at the end of the day, there weren't enough school choice children in kindergarten for a whole host of reasons. We had a very long list, and those who decided to accept the offer were much less. Plus, we had some residents move in, which filled some spots. And we said, after our budget was finally passed, we had said to Dr. Kazavan, we really can't support that additional kindergarten classroom. So that was one of the cuts that was made.
So, looking forward, with the preschool kids that are there now, I know that you don't have a full count because my daughter doesn't attend preschool in district. It's tuition-based and it's not a full day. So I could go on about that, but I'm not going to. At what point are you going to decide whether or not it's the right choice to allow school choice kids into that next kindergarten class? Because I think today, with the information that you have, that's not an appropriate decision to make.
Well, at this point, based on the information we have, Dr. Kazavan has already alluded to the fact that when this comes up as a school committee vote, which will be probably in the March timeframe, he's going to recommend that there is and will be none. Obviously, we'll have some better information, certain numbers, but it's very hard to predict. With school choice, we can make a decision today not to have open classrooms in whatever grades. We can also vote to change that at some point. So situation change, we could act on it up to a certain point. There's a whole set of regulations we have to go through. But based on what you've heard today, that's what I'm hearing. So,
thank you.
Hello, Amy Buzzell, Phillipston. I just wanted to ask you to clarify this on this paper right here. The white column proposed fiscal year budget is $20,352, correct? And if we, million. And if we And if we keep Phillipston open, that's the blue column, the 20,660,000?
This puts back to, if I'm correct, the, with the needs, by adding the intensive special needs teacher and a couple of the things that we have to do, that's the 20,660,000, and that supports the current configuration. So when we start our budget process, the first task is level service us. You know, put everything in there, and then add what we have to, and that's where this 20,660,000 came from.
So the 20,352,000, is that if we close Phillipston?
No.
What's that
that's
number?
Not having
Just if we
the-
don't have these teachers? Okay, so what would the proposed budget be if we close Phillipston?
So, I want to make sure we're clear. The number you see up on the screen, 20,352,725, is the current configuration with no extra staff whatsoever.
Okay.
Okay? The number you see next to it in blue, the 20,660,666, you change that number. But that's what the additional.
Yeah,
staff.
I thought that too.
Okay, we need to change that quick. Anyway, I'm going to literally throw a dollar in.
Yeah, let's just throw an extra buck, just,
But anyway, that's with the additional staff, okay, so just so we're clear. And so,
So as far as what does it look like? So at this point, again, because the school committee has not made decisions or voted on anything, we're holding this hearing to get some input from the community because we want to hear what people have to say. Our next step is to give Dr. Casabet some direction on where we feel we need to go in order to be fiscally solvent for not only this year, but for the upcoming years, because this discussion is the same one we're going to have next year. And that's the unfortunate, this is just going to, you know, someone said on Sunday, it's Groundhog Day. Well, it certainly is around here again. So our next steps will be to come up with what the number is. I know they've already started working and done some work on where it would be. They wouldn't have come with this configuration change if they didn't think that there were enough savings for it to be something for us to take a look at. I know that there is still some work that they're doing on that because there's a lot of moving parts when we start. Because the savings are not just at the elementary level, it's district-wide. High school, middle school, there's all sorts of things that have to be looked at. So I know we're focusing on elementary because that's the biggest impact here, but it is a true district-wide, and I know they're still working on some of those numbers. So we're meeting again next week. So we have a school committee meeting. Obviously, we'll have, we'll be talking more, and that'll be on the agenda for us to go over is what do those numbers look like so that we can get to our next budget hearing and have that information available.
one other thing that I would just like to say would just be in regards to transportation. I know in the last meeting, one of the guys from Templeton was talking about how we were only getting 76% of the transportation reimbursed, and this year we're already having struggles with having enough buses, getting kids where they need to go. If we decide to uproot all of the Phillipston kids and now transport them to Templeton, won't we then come into another transportation crisis where we won't have the busing available to get the kids to the school and things like that?
I'm going to defer to Ms. Geister because she is the busing queen.
Well, there's 2 buses currently that transport the kids in Phillipston to Phillipston Memorial. Those same 2 buses would just transfer
Them a little further down the street.
Right down the street in Templeton.
And then in regards to, actually being around Templeton School, I've heard that, I'm not there, so I don't know, but I've heard that there's a lot of issues, with people trying to get to and from work, with all the cluster that's kind of right there, adding the children from Phillipston to Templeton, wouldn't that kind of make it even harder?
well, so certainly there is no way to, smooth that over, right? It's been challenging. That is, I bring this slide up just in terms of the projection. Again, we've made a lot of progress in terms of the traffic and all those type of things since the beginning of school. That's why it's important to keep the number of students about roughly the same at the elementary school. which, give or take would be the same amount of parents and teachers. So if we were talking some unbelievable number of, 700, 800, I don't know, you're right, it overwhelms us. It would overwhelm Templeton, it would overwhelm everything. Given what we're doing now, that it's at least manageable. And I have to say, I think someone said it at one of our meetings, pay a lot of money for buses. Not for nothing. You might want to put your kid on. Okay? I'm just saying, we have to transport a lot of kids just by our little, it's okay, you're going to be fine. Put your children on the bus. If you don't like the long lines, put your children on the bus. Honestly, we pay a lot of money for transportation, folks, and it has to run the route regardless. I get it, moms, dads, I get it. But there's an awful lot of cars dropping kids off. Actually, the kids on the bus get there faster than the kids in the car. So I just want to just kind of throw that out there as kind of a public service announcement. You might want to just think about the bus.
Are there any other questions?
Yes, I have another question.
You know what, Karen? I did have someone else standing up. You've already spoken, and I will get to you next time. I apologize.
Amy McGee, Phillipston. I just have a question. By reconfiguring, if we close the Phillipston school and then we all go to Templeton, it's saying we're staying with the same teachers, moving 5th grade up here. You're going to have 5 empty classrooms in that new school. Why can't the Phillipston teachers go over and have 5 classrooms per grade in the elementary level, even if 5th grade comes back up to middle school? I'm just curious.
No, it's a money issue.
It's
a
okay.
money issue.
No,
So
I was
that's
just wondering.
the problem, because what happens is, so let's just pretend that we've got to save money, we have to have some savings, and if we did reduce, say, teachers in Templeton Elementary and left Phillipston open, the class sizes there would be they would be much, much higher, because the class sizes today in Templeton Elementary are much higher than Phillipston's.
Yeah.
So that's part of, that gets us back to this equity issue, which is kind of why we are looking at this reconfiguration, and reassigning students to provide for the equity. But it does come down to numbers. It's all numbers driven.
But so you'll have 5 empty classrooms in the new school?
So the answer.
I just
Yeah.
was curious. Yeah.
Right, yeah, I mean, I don't know ultimately how many we'll have open. If everything were to transition exactly the way that I've said it right now, then yes, absolutely, think about that for a second. But this isn't a matter of programming, it's a matter of, because before, the PFA came into concept. Oh, you're breaking the PFA. Well, first off, the building no longer is under the PFA, it's Templeton's. And 2, we have enough kids to have 5 teachers each, right?
Yeah.
So the kids are there, the classrooms would be utilized if in fact we had the money to have 5 more teachers. So the fact of the matter is that the number of kids that would need to be educated in that building are there. Unfortunately, given the financial constraints, we need to do something different. So it's a little bit different than before when we actually made a configuration that didn't have, we just had empty classrooms because we made that configuration that way. That's not the case here, is that we have the kids, just not the money for all the teachers.
Okay, I was just curious. Yeah.
Very good way to
All right, thank you.
Go ahead.
Okay, so according to this diagram, the current totals would be somewhere around 767 students in the TES and pre-K through 5. But on the other hand, you're saying 651 for TES. I just don't understand where the numbers are coming from.
5th grade got pulled out.
Fifth grade
They're
got
gonna take
pulled
5th
out.
grade out from up to the middle school.
How many students are in 5th grade?
120 something, maybe. Right? You've got the exact number. Projected, what's your projected?
Yeah, 109.
Oh, because everybody got a grade.
And the other question,
Graduated.
along the way, you've been courting Winchendon to join Narragansett.
I can't, sorry. We were talking about hydro, I couldn't hear you.
Along the way, you've been courting Winchendon to join this community. How is that proceeding, and is there any progress on that?
Well, we're going to do some co-op. We did with the band, which is awesome. We've got matter of fact, proposing some co-op opportunities athletically next fall. You know, we haven't courted them any other way. I don't know how to answer that other than because it's not really my realm to do that. I think it's the way of the future. I think our friends, you know, Quabbin, that was a big article. They've entered into conversations. You need to have a conversation about that. We have certainly not had any formal conversations, but we are friendly. We do as much sharing as we possibly can. Where that goes, we'll see.
I mean, everything's on the table. We have had discussions as a committee about where we need to go. The state is pushing for further regionalization through either full regionalization with other towns forming new districts. They're looking at shared services such as superintendency unions and central, and then they're looking at just sharing some staff to maybe do some central office functions. So some conversations have had, especially as Dr. Kasman said, with some of the programming. We would be foolish not to say that we don't need to look at that. Even if the answer is it doesn't make sense, we need to look at everything because, again, we're going to be coming back here no matter what we do this year. Next year, we're going to be sitting here and having the same exact discussion.
Sorry, I have one more question. And it's a number question.
So considering, this is Julie again with Templeton, if we did not want to go back to the override vote, what number are we looking at? Like, if we just wanted to sail through and be just ducky and just fly right through this season without having to go back to vote and bring the towns back together to vote, what is that number? Is that the 19,987.50, which is 2.5% more than the 19.5 that was passed last year?
So I think where we are with that is we are still coming up with a proposal, and then we'll engage with some discussions with the towns. We've been, Dr. Kazimat speaks with the towns to try and get a feel, but until we come up with, here's where we think we are, I can't really answer your question just yet. If you want to take and say, okay, 2.5% over our baseline, is it 2.5% over the town's assessments? Remember, we don't have any new revenue. So 2.5% over baseline puts the entire 2.5 growth on both towns.
But
Okay?
is that over the 19,500,000 that was passed for 20?
So 19.5 times 2.5%.
It's just under 20 million, so we
Yeah.
still need to go to an override, no matter if we're a dollar
Potentially,
over.
but again, until we come up with what we think we might need and what we can do, and then work with the towns and negotiate with the position, I really can't answer specifically for you because we haven't
Sure.
gotten there yet.
So if, as parents, we wanted to participate in funding our school, would we then go to the select board and ask them to consider the budget without needing an override? Is that our next step as parents if we want to support your budget? What is the best way for us to do that?
I think you need to, whatever the direction that the school committee tasks us, I think that you would have to see what that number, I think you would have to see what the result is of that. If this is the number here, like if that's the number, the 2352,725, then, yeah, I mean, let's face it, I mean, that is an $852,000 increase split, wherever my slide is, right? So you'd have to, that would probably have to happen.
Okay.
Is that right?
And I just want to say thank you, specifically to you for last year. You had some cafes and talk about the budget things. I think that we need to continue to do that as a community to educate our parents because I really feel like we're commuters and we don't know what's going on. So if I can support you with that, or if we can help organize some cheerleaders, please let us know.
Well, thank you. And I think next week, regardless of what the task is, we're going to roll out just some ways that we're going to communicate. We need to communicate. We did a lot of, outreach. We did 8 separate meetings plus I don't know how many other meetings. It's the general. We're going to have to probably tail that back a little bit, but we're trying to be a little bit more smarter, and a little bit more efficient in how we do that. But no, the point is well taken. And certainly, I'm always available. I will make myself available to folks who may have questions, et cetera. But thank you.
Thank you.
Sylvia, just because she hadn't spoken yet.
Good evening. I'm Sylvia Haley from Phillipston. This has been an informational meeting, which is really great. It's really good that we were able to be here tonight. My question is, and I don't know if it can be answered tonight, school choice is talked about a lot, and you answered the question that I was wondering about. The school choice children that are here now stay. They're yours till they graduate. If they have a sibling that is not in school yet, what I've heard, and that's just heard, that their sibling would be allowed to come to this district. Well, that's just, what I'm hearing out there.
And I'm only going to say this because there's, the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education just issued a brand-new frequently asked question package on school choice, because there's been a lot of gray areas and a lot of districts are doing things, and I think when you read, it's out posted on our website under school choice, you can go there and you'll see it's all in its own frame and you can read it, that there's been different scenarios. That is only the case. So siblings do get preference. If the school committee's policy is that siblings get preference, because that usually is good policy to have. Only if there's a school choice opening would the sibling be allowed to come. So if we don't take any more school choice students, no siblings would come. If a space opens up, they would be first on that list. So does that make sense?
Okay, so if there would be an opening, say kindergarten, for instance, if the Templeton children and the Phillipston children are together next year, and there is room, then you would take a student that's a sibling of a school choice that's already in the district.
And then a sibling of someone who is already enrolled in school choice.
Okay.
If you read that frequently asked questions, there's a twin rule. So if you have twins and it's a lottery, which we have to do because you're not siblings, and one twin gets picked and the other doesn't, guess what? The one twin comes in and the other one doesn't, and the sibling rule isn't invoked until that student goes through and is there for the year, and then they can come the following year. So there's, as I said, the FAQ is really kind of interesting with how detailed instructions that they've given us to administer school choice.
So if this district chooses not to take in school choice, there's a chance that that sibling wouldn't get in next year.
Yes.
And my other question is, I heard like the 5th grade, that there's going to be open classrooms in the new school if they come here? Is that what I just heard?
So ultimately, the building is built to have, 4 teachers per grade, right? 1 through 5. So there are rooms. So, right, did I say that right? K through 5, sorry. K through 5. So ultimately, what happens is that if we have to reduce our budget by X, and we have to reduce the number of total elementary teachers per grade by 1, right? Those kids from 5 would be going to 4, and yes, there would probably be some open rooms, yes. And that's, in that exact scenario, then yes, there would be open rooms at Templeton Elementary.
So the next question would be, well, okay, well, why not keep 5th grade there?
Right,
And I think
that's what
you'll
I'm
notice
wondering.
If you look at the amount of students that would put into the building, it becomes an issue with, how do we manage those students? What's the best, staffing for that? And it wouldn't make sense. I think we spent a lot of time thinking about this configuration. And if our financial position changes, or let's say we have a big influx of residents and it does push us over, 30 kids a class, we really need to have a very serious discussion on, do we need to add another teacher? Well, guess what? If there's not an open room, we would have no place to put that. So, we're hoping that this is, short-term, whatever that means, how many years short-term is, but that we would eventually be able to staff back up where we need to be to have class sizes come down fill the classrooms, is that what you mean?
Now, if that is short-term, say short-term moving Phillipston to Templeton, how long could we keep Phillipston School unattended?
That, I think we would need to be discussing with the town of Phillipston. And again, since this is really just in discussion phases at this
Right.
point, we haven't really had that discussion yet to find out, okay, so if we did need to reassign pupils, what would it mean? Does the building get turned over? Do we hold it in abeyance just in case in a couple of years we need it? I don't know. We haven't really gotten to that part of the point yet.
Okay, well, thank you very much.
Mary Ann from Baldwinville. You were saying that you were taking in some Winchington students for like the band program and possibly athletics later. Is there any, do they reimburse the town of Templeton for any of this, or is it a?
Remember, to be the district, they would reimburse them.
Well, that's what I'm saying.
Yes.
Is there any charge to them to say, so your student's coming here to be in band, so you owe us $100 or whatever, or is it just, we just welcome them in?
So depending on the agreement, right? So if, for example, we co-op with 3 other districts for our hockey team. So Quabbin, Winchendon, Gardner, Narragansett. I don't think I'm missing anyone. I went to the game last night. So we all split, all the towns split a certain amount of money, right, to pay for hockey. And each of the players, right, then have to pay the user fee, okay? So Gardner, in this case, they take care of transportation. No, they take care of the coach. They pay for the coach straight out. The money that we pay as a district for hockey goes to transportation, along with Quabbin and Winchendon, pay for, the busing, et cetera, and ice time, which is very expensive. But the user fees come to us. So in other words, so when our Narragansett hockey players pay their user fee, they pay us, right? Gardner's hockey players' user fees go to Gardner. So there's not a cost necessarily. Everyone is paying equally, and they're paying to play with the user fee, so it works out. So if we get into a situation where that might be, I'm trying to think of another, I don't know, we don't have another co-op golf team, I guess, yeah. And it's between 2 districts, then we have to work out an agreement. But it's always it's equitable, it's split. You know what I mean? It all depends on what really the sport or the activity. But the user fees are generally going back to their sending districts. The transportation and stuff like that gets involved in these.
Well, is there any user fee involved in like being part of our band?
So I would say this was our first year doing the band, number 1, and we had how many?
So we had 3 kids from Bloomington to join our band, and as of right now, our own students don't pay user fees for band because it's a class, and they get grades, so it would be like paying for their grades. So no, there is no user fee involved.
For marching in. Now, that does not mean that if we start having some discussions with another town, be it Winchendon or anywhere else, to co-op another sport, that we wouldn't enter into an arrangement to share the costs. And as Dr. Kazanet said, usually student activity fees get recouped to the towns and districts, and then the districts pay in to support the entire co-op sport. So it's kind of a one-off thing at this point, that you determine the costs and how they're assessed when you come up with the arrangement.
Yes, but right now it's considered a course.
Band is the course.
So then you're paying for a teacher, so wouldn't that be trickle down to the number of students that come from another town to utilize our teacher?
No, because they're not going through the class. They're not going through the band class. There's actually class along with band. With the marching, etc. They don't come to class. They don't go to the class. They are part of the marching band. The actual outside. I don't know how else to say it. If I'm saying this wrong, please help me.
No, they only come to the marching band portion of the education, music education. They come to after-school rehearsals, which are generally from 6 to 8 p.m. They participate in parades. They help with competitions with
And there's no transportation, we're not paying for their
They're
transportation.
they're paying their own transportation costs, parents bring them, pick them up, bring them home.
Right.
So it's kind of a wash, all we're basically giving them is the
Yeah.
teacher.
As I said, it's a very bad example to use because it is unique in its nature. You know, and when you do co-op, and we're the host school, because that's the other thing, I think, with hockey is Gardner the host school.
Gardner's the host.
So Gardner coordinates all of the activities that need to happen for hockey, booking the ice time and getting transportation. And then all the districts that are involved pay Gardner back and we reimburse them through either the user fees or whatever the athletic amounts that we budgeted for that particular sport. So that's more likely to be a scenario than if we do co-op with other sports and we're the host school.
Thank you.
Any other questions?
What's the current elementary enrollment in the district? Do we know just offhand round numbers?
You
K
got it.
through
He
4?
can give you an exact
Is
number.
October 1?
Yeah, but just K through 4.
Well, just give him, he can add them up.
Yeah, I can do the math later.
K through 4?
Sure.
Well, let's see, 113 kindergarten, 110 so that's for first grade,
Yep.
115 for second grade, 117 for third grade, although this number's up here, but anyway, 110 for the fourth grade, that's current. And you see these numbers up here are the projected, so I put the fifth, fourth graders, fifth graders.
Sure. Thank you.
All right, this presentation, we will post out on the website, and if anyone wants a copy, I can't find it, please reach out to central office and we'll make sure that it gets sent to you. Are there any other questions?
How do I get into the central office? Where do I go?
Well, you would have to be buzzed in, so if you want to come in, you'll have to go to the baseball side, the baseball field. There's a door back there, and you buzz, and they'll buzz you in. And I would recommend making an appointment if you'd like to come see someone to make sure that whoever you want to speak to is there, since it's not always guaranteed there.
So you don't go to the front door, you go to the back.
Yeah, go to the back door, yes.
So nobody can see.
So nobody can see. Yeah, that's the way we like it.
Exactly.
All right, well, see.
Just drop something.
All right, so I'm going to close the public hearing portion of this meeting. So I thank everyone for coming and your questions and your comments. You've given us a lot to think about. We have a couple of homework assignments. I'm going to now go to school committee comments, if anyone has anything to say. Questions, comments, requests for Dr. Cazavan for when we meet next. Anybody have anything? Because I always do, so I'll go. Again, thank you everybody for coming and speaking and letting us hear what you have to say and giving us some things to think about. For our next meeting, I think we need to nail down what do we look like. You've given us some good information about, what the reasons why we have to consider a proposed reassignment and configuration. But now, obviously, we need to have some hard numbers behind that. So I think for our next meeting, we really need to see what does that mean from a numbers perspective, because at the end of the day, this is really going to come down to what the two towns can afford and, what they'll be able to support the district. Since we know we don't really have any additional revenues, we know we're hurting on the Medicaid reimbursement side, we have a lot of pencil sharpening to do to come up with a number that the towns will be able to support. So if we could ask for that for next week. I think obviously the enrollments, the numbers, which I know you have class sizes. I think to Mrs. Kibbe's point, to have maybe some baseline information. What does the state have? And I also recall we're going to look at maybe some per pupil costs, which might be a good thing for the school committee to see too, if we can have that for next week. Is there any other information the school committee would like, so that we can give Dr. Cazavan and Mrs. Geister some fun activities for the next several days until we meet again? Okay, well, I think that's it. And seeing no other comments from the school committee, the next meeting is Wednesday, the 12th, at 6 o'clock, right here in the KIVA. I would then entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
I have a motion, do I have a second? I have a second. All in favor? Aye.
We don't have our finances.